The distant sounds of battle, screams of pain, and yells of defiance, punctuated by staccato bursts of automatic weapons, were dying in number. Whatever battle had raged was nearly over. You know, as I think about how to tell this story, I'm constantly torn between reading it straight, I guess, as a narrator, or what I can do with my voice and how much I can bring it to life as a voice actor. And, it's something I've never done before. And at nearly 70 years old, I'm still learning and exploring what I can do with my voice. Of course, it would be much easier if I could just hire an experienced voice actor. But as a writer, and now the director, I'm sure I would have a lot of pleasant surprises and maybe a lot of times when I thought it could be done differently. I could use AI. Almost all platforms of delivery are now accepting AI-narrated books. And on some levels, it's certainly much easier. But, I've done a lot of testing, and I try to stay up with the advancements and what's going on. But I think for myself, I find I'm constantly surprised and amazed and a little bit of wonder, I guess, at the quality of the technology, but disappointed in the actual reads and the emotional delivery. And so, I think someday they're going to be accepted. The software is going to get better and better. And at the same time, we're going to get used to it and probably in a lot of ways lower our standards and, be accepting of it. So with that in mind, for now, I'm just excited to try to bring the story to life and have some fun with it and to share that with you. So these are raw, unedited reads with all my screw-ups and I guess my drinking of water or, whatever I need. So anyway, on to Chapter 15. Chapter 15. Funakoshi hid behind the smoke, his back against the large steel drum of chemicals. So be it. He slipped off the intricate embroidered bag, pulled the coveted blade from the scabbard, slipped the sword fallen on the floor into its place. He twisted the cap off the spout of the drum and slid the sword of heaven inside, watched it disappear into the thick gelatin, and sealed it back up. With the replacement in one hand, he scooped up a fallen ninja sword in his other and slashed out. His tabi shod feet silent, Shingo used the shadows and geometry as he'd been taught to remain invisible. He passed several groups of armed men and could only imagine they were looking for him. They know the son of Mitsu Funakoshi would be their most valuable prize. The distant sounds of battle, screams of pain and yells of defiance, punctuated by staccato bursts of automatic weapons fire, were dying in number. Whatever battle had raged was nearly over. Mitsu Funakoshi was more than a businessman. The ninja sword slashed and flashed, thrust and sliced through the air, and 3 of the Cubans dropped behind fountains of blood. Even as they screamed and died, he shuddered beneath a spray of bullets as his legs were cut out from under him. Acosta dropped the empty Tech-9. No need to replace the mag. One of his men replaced the entire weapon. He let off a burst into the ceiling and a call for order. With no more targets to be found, gunshots and screams faded as his men began gathering for further orders. Crawling over fallen Cuban and Japanese alike, Shingo sneaked past crates and boxes, powerless to help. He watched through the tears as his father pushed himself onto his bloody knees, the cloth-wrapped imposter clutched in one hand, the ninja toe dripping with blood in the other. The sounds and smells of dying men and the noxious chemical fumes of the burning lab filled the air. Parts of the ceiling gave way, and melted wiring and cabling dripped in great pendulous loops like jungle vines. Gusts of wind swept through the rupture and fanned the flames, while pelting rain whipped sideways across the lab. Looking around the lab, at the devastation, the blood and the death, Angel was filled with pride. There was proof his father was a general he could learn from. Those that remained, bloody and exhausted, would someday live and die and fight under his direction. Angel watched the two patriarchs stare at each other as the rest waited for orders. Even Acosta was impressed at the force of will that kept his foe upright on his bloody knees. His eyes never wavered, but Acosta gestured at the ruin around them. What the fuck is all this shit about? We take what is rightfully ours. Yours. This is my country, my land. Nothing here is yours. He spun around the room, warming to the theater of it, eyes drawn to the melted lab and the cracking and popping of burnt flesh. And you do what? Try to play God? Funakoshi wobbled on his bloody stumps, but remained silent. We invite you into our country, open our doors, and like a shitty guest, you take and you never fucking leave. Do you think that makes you American? We know how to fucking take. Acosta looked to his men and the devastation raging around him. Keep him alive until I know what the fuck was going on here. The smallest of nods and men crept forward to retrieve the cloth-wrapped katana, ready to blast the man to oblivion, but wary of the ninja sword still clutched in the dying man's other hand. Shingo, tears in his eyes, wanted to let his father know he was still alive, that the lessons had not been in vain, that their honor would live on. His hand gripped a sword, and he gathered his legs under him, his sights set on the obvious leader of the gangsters. He'd heard the name, Mario Acosta. He stilled his breath, said his prayers for strength, gathered his legs, and was jerked backward off his feet, his mouth covered and pulled deeper into the shadows. As Acosta's men started forward, Funakoshi took one last look around the room, the swords heavy in his hands, his grip faltering. His vision narrowed as the room blurred and dimmed. He focused on the hands reaching for the imposter's sword, his eyes behind them wary of the smaller straight sword still clutched in his hand, their machine pistols ready to fire upon his slightest move. He'd failed. Said a prayer for Shingo. Before anyone could react, he pulled the ninja sword up and completely around his neck in one swift, graceful motion, the razor-like blade cutting inches deep. Blood poured from his neck and throat, and Mitsu Funakoshi, descended from 500 years of samurai, drained of purpose and blood, toppled over. Shingo felt his father's pain as if his own neck had been sliced. He twisted in his attacker's arms, throwing a ridge hand and attacking with an elbow strike that would have felled any man, yet found only air. Blinded by fury, he was going for another when he was grabbed in an iron vise and shaken as easily as a rag doll. Like a dog shedding water, his eyes cleared of tears long enough to recognize Nakamura. He gasped and clung to his friend and teacher. The ninja, too, had watched Funakoshi claim his honor and fall, stifled his anger and the shouts of indignation bubbling in his throat. Nakamura had known within moments of the attack that their fight was in vain. The surprise and firepower of the gangsters overwhelming. Their work in the lab and the plans for expansion were over. For now. He was torn by duty to his father. He was torn by duty to the father, but determined to save the son. That he held him now was a sign of the destiny still to be written. Nakamura held the boy close, absorbing the bone-racking sobs as his own. Acosta watched his son's expressions, as excited as a bitch in heat, surprised that the boy didn't run over and lap at the blood pooling on the cement floor. His son, the psychopath. So be it. Okay, like always, a few mistakes, but a lot going on. The story is big, and I hope I can do it justice a little bit. Certainly working hard at it. So, thanks for coming in, and on to chapter 16. Thanks. Bye.